Hello, all, and welcome to this episode of Talking Taboo podcast. I'm your host, Divyan Sharma, and in this episode, we'll be talking about taboos concerning suicide and mental health. We have with us today Dr. Anjali Chhabria, a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist who is widely known for her work in the field of mental health. She's the founder of a counseling center called Mind Temple and has authored a book called Death is Not the Answer, which helps in understanding suicide and ways to prevent it. Welcome to our show, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Devansh, for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be with all you intelligent people here on this show.
It's definitely our pleasure to host you, ma'am. Ma'am, before we get started on this conversation, it is important to put this episode in the current context. In the past 1 month, discourse around mental health and suicide has definitely gained more traction, especially after Sushant Singh Rajput's suicide, and is hotly debated across various platforms. Ma'am, I would want to know from you, what is it that makes people or pushes people to be taking their own lives? I mean, what is the mindset when they are taking these actions? Why do they do it?
So, before I even answer your question, it is definitely true that this young man's suicide got a lot of attention in the media. But what I would also like to highlight that yesterday only I was reading in the news there have been so many suicides in Kolkata itself. And I think what we need to understand is that definitely what happens is that let me just put some things clear. Now, a lot of people who end up taking their life, it may look absolutely sudden. Okay,
Hmm.
but the fact is that at least 7 out of 10 of them have been contemplating this for some time. So it's actually not as sudden as it looks. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when I was doing research for my book, what I did find out was that 75% of these people who kill themselves may be suffering from a diagnosable mental health condition.
Hmm.
And it is only few in whom it may appear extremely impulsive.
Hmm.
Now, what is the final thing? What is the final straw that breaks their back? So, what actually happens is that studies show that there are people who kill themselves actually may have a genetic history of someone in the family committing suicide or killing themselves or dying of suicide. We've stopped using this term committing suicide because it's as if it's akin to committing a crime. So, what happens is that, okay, there is genetics, then there is a personality. So, people who are outgoing, who discuss their problems, who laugh at themselves, who don't take themselves as seriously as some of the other people take themselves, these guys are less likely to kill themselves. But then there are those who are introvertish, who get really affected, who are very harsh on themselves. They get affected when anything goes wrong. So
Hmm.
if a teacher makes a comment or if I if I made a mistake, I don't forgive myself. And
Hmm.
these are the people who keep beating themselves all the time if something goes wrong. Of course, there are external stressors. There are
Hmm.
triggers. So it could be a broken relationship. It feels really bad when someone who you've been talking to for so many months, there's some stupid misunderstanding and the relationship breaks and you have your expectations which are not met. The other person has expectations and the relationship goes sour. Now, while most of the people can take this easily, there are those who can't. Or for an exam, like a failure in an exam, or the inability to get a job. Of course,
Yeah.
now in the current scenario, there is loneliness, there is lockdown, there is COVID, the stress of getting COVID, when you get COVID, when you lose a loved one. Now, these are all stressors. People talk about loneliness. Okay, you can be alone and yet not feel lonely. Okay,
Hmm.
and then there are those who can be in a group, in a room full of people and feel lonely. The other fact, since I'm talking to all you brilliant students here, is the role of substances. Almost 75 to 80% of people who take the final step could be under the influence of a substance. So, a very important piece of information that I want to give all our listeners is that the next time someone is feeling low, someone is feeling sad, don't tell them go have a drink and everything will become all right. Okay, the
Hmm.
fact is that he or she may go have a drink and then just start thinking that why am I living? Because the depression actually becomes worse under the influence of substances. And there is also something that we call as disinhibition. We all have certain inhibitions, and these inhibitions go away when you take a substance, any psychoactive substance, alcohol. Suddenly you say that, oh, forget it, let me just take the final plunge. So,
Right.
a little
Hmm.
longish answer to your question.
Hmm.
But what
Yeah.
happens is the fact is that each person is different. And it's very easy to say, oh, because of this, he killed himself, or because of that, she killed herself. The fact is, it's a complex situation where there are different factors which come into play.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, this is quite a complicated situation where people may generally not understand how to, help others. So on this point, actually, ma'am, how do we actually go about helping others? And even before helping, in fact, how do we know that someone's suffering? A lot of the times people may not actually share these problems. So what to do really?
Actually, the important thing over here is which is something that I would like to share with all of you is that 7 out of 10 people actually give out signs. They tell you that I'm gonna kill myself, please help me. Because actually, when people talk about suicide, it's a cry for help. They're waiting for someone to come and help them. So we need
Hmm.
to take these things really seriously. So if your friend says, Arey, what's the point of living? Don't
Hmm.
say, oh my God, what am I going to do? How do I help him or her? Instead, wait for a little private time. Reach out to that person. I mean, of course, that same day and maybe that same hour, take them to the side and say, I'm a little concerned. Why did you make that statement? Oh, no, 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 I was joking. No, tell me. Tell me what has been happening to you. I want to help you.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
chances are, and of course, don't gossip about it. People don't know what to do, so they go and tell each other, अरे पता है ये बोल रहा था उसको मरने का है. Don't
Hmm.
laugh about it. Reach out to that person because what happens is, I mean, the young actor who you were talking about earlier, okay, now obviously his perception of himself and the world's perception of him did not match,
Hmm.
for that moment while he decided that his life was not worth living.
Yeah.
So we really don't know what happened, what transpired.
Hmm.
But my real wish is that I wish he had reached out to a few people who and
Hmm.
had shared this information. I'm feeling horrible today. I don't want to live. I wish he had reached out because I'm sure if he had, some of his friends would have reached out to him and said, what's wrong with you? You are so successful. You're so intelligent. You're so smart. You're so good looking. Even if a few things may not be going your way. But
Hmm.
the reason the world is shocked is because he seemed to have it all. Looks, intelligence, success, everything.
Hmm.
And yet he took that plunge. Okay. So
Right.
obviously there was a momentary, whatever that moment had, where you think your life is not worth living because the person on that side starts feeling extremely hopeless about the future.
Yeah.
So it's that moment of hopelessness or even maybe worthless that, oh, I'm not good enough. And you can't see the fact that you are of worth. Maybe something is going wrong and you may feel worthless to one person, but you're not
Hmm.
actually worthless to the rest of the world. Or you may
Yeah.
even be feeling helpless. I don't know what to do. I know there are lots and lots of people who thought they would get a good job and pay off their loans, right now, and they haven't been able to do it. So they may be feeling
Hmm.
helpless because they
Yeah.
don't know now what to do. Death is definitely not the answer.
Right, right. That's definitely true. These are indeed depressing times, and it has never been more important to reach out to others and try to seek help. But ma'am, equally concerning is the fact that there is so much stigma around this, and the statistics are, of course, mind-boggling that almost every 40 seconds, one person takes their life. and Indian share is one third in the global suicide rates, and that's quite surprising. So in this context, why do you think people talk about suicide in a hushed manner? Why is it a taboo still?
So earlier, the whole thing was that only mad people visit psychiatrists. And so, because of that, if anyone was suffering from a mental illness or not feeling good, even today, people like I go for seminars where people say, don't use the word mental illness, it doesn't sound nice. So, I turn around and I tell them, I said 20, 25 years ago, when I decided to take up psychiatry, there were actually people coming and telling my parents that, oh, tell her that, we believe all psychiatrists lose their mind after some time. So high was the stigma.
Mm,
Nobody will marry your daughter, such stupid things. Today, these are the same people who tell me that, oh, we're so glad, you do what you do. Because actually, if you think about it, our mental health is the most important thing. You may have all the abilities, but on a day you're not feeling good, you can't concentrate, you can't study because you're feeling anxious, you're feeling restless. But the minute you're able to calm yourself down and get a hold on your mental health, the day changes. It could be
mm,
raining or thundering outside, but if I'm in good control of my mental health, I'm able to do everything. So the stigma has been there for ages. In our country, especially where if someone was suffering from a mental illness, they were taken to faith healers, and those faith healers would beat them up and even sometimes molest them.
mm,
And that itself would create a further burden on their own mental health because it would affect their self esteem because they would think that they are really not worth anything. So
mm,
now is the time to change the stigma. And now, actually, I'm so happy that, there's so many young people who come out there, whether it's actors, whether it's doctors, lawyers, people come out and say, yes, I went through a depression. I have taken treatment for it. I went through a panic disorder. I went through bipolar. And people are talking about it. And yes, we need to talk about it. My figures of my book about one third of all the deaths happening because of suicide. That's almost 5 years, 4 years ago. And at that time, the reason I wrote the book because I realized that suicide rate in our country was doubling and it has increased even further. And one of the reasons is because people don't understand it. And you
mm.
know what? Just writing one book in English is not going to help. We need to translate the book into many languages because here you're only targeting an English population, English reading population. Okay, we need to go into villages. We need to talk about the effect of mental health issues. We need to identify the problems because, according to WHO figures, 1 out of every 4 to 1 out of every 7 people is suffering from treatable conditions. So once we start treating, once we start identifying, once we start treating these conditions, people are going to feel better. And definitely, when you feel better, and yes, of course, there's another myth about mental health that if you go to a psychiatrist, they will give you sleeping pills, okay, and
Hmm.
they'll make you sleep all your life. Okay, now that's a myth because there are so many medicines. In fact, let me share something with you. There are studies which have been done that psychiatrists prescribe less sleeping pills. In fact, it is the other doctors, or forget doctors, your own grandmother, if you tell her, I don't get sleep, she'll tell you, take this sleeping pill and go to sleep. Or your own chemist will tell
Yeah.
you that. The
Mm,
fact of the matter is that insomnia is a symptom.
mm,
So if you're not getting sleep, please don't drink or please don't take some sleeping pill and go to sleep. In fact, try
yeah.
to understand why are you not getting sleep?
Mm,
Is there an underlying condition? Are you just stressed about something and worrying about it? Or are you suffering from a psychiatric disorder, the first symptom of which is insomnia?
mm, mm.
So we really need to reach out and save these people and tell them that definitely life has lots of things to offer them, and just because they are feeling so low, you should not take the final plunge. Reach out
Yeah.
and share whatever's going wrong in your life.
So absolutely, ma'am, that's actually important. But if you're talking about the role of therapists at this point, I think it'll be important for our audience to really understand what does therapy really do. Because a lot of people discard the idea since they feel that no one can really understand what they are going through in the specific set of circumstances. And of course, I mean, as you mentioned, there are a lot of taboos around seeking this help, so it's just a further disincentive from moving towards psychiatric help. So how do you think that how do we go about addressing these taboos, and more importantly, if you could just explain what is the involvement of therapists in the process? I mean, what do they do?
So,
What do they talk about? Yeah.
so whenever somebody is going through an emotional condition, okay, it's important, yes, to meet a mental health specialist to find out whether it is a medical condition which you need to take medicine for. But sometimes it is also our own personalities, or we need the help of a therapist to help us look inwards to find out what we are doing wrong in the situation. So there are different types of therapy. And when you go to a therapist, for you, you may be drowning in your problems, but the therapist is like a coach who helps you to swim through life to make you understand where you're going wrong and what if you change a few attitudes or a few behavior patterns of yours, how life around you changes. So that is the importance of therapy.
Right, right, definitely. Ma'am, earlier in the episode, we talked about how a majority of these people who are trying to commit suicide actually have some diagnosable medical condition. So, when we talk about these medical conditions, how do we, I mean, specifically things like depression, how do we ourselves identify it? Because, I mean, when to know when we should seek help. And this is especially true during lockdown when a lot of emotions might have been triggered for a lot of us who are trapped at home or are not happy in wherever we are staying. So, how do you think we identify these patterns?
So first of all, see a little not a little sadness, a little stress, sometimes not sleeping properly, okay, or getting a little irritable because there are too many people cramped in one space. All these are natural emotions. But if a emotion is not allowing you to perform, or is like a guest who is staying in your house permanently, so even if things around you are getting better, okay, but you are still feeling distressed, maybe this is the time to reach out and seek help. Of course, if you go online, you will find all the symptoms of depression. But what I would request you is not to start treating yourself or not to become your Google doctor. There are a lot of people out there who you can reach out and take help from. So even if you have to, take help and the person says, no, no, this is normal stress, what you're going through is normal, it's better to overdiagnose in this condition and reach out to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and ask them if they think you need help or not. Just in case, like as we are saying today, that all fevers could be COVID,
Hmm.
so just
Yeah.
reach out. Similarly, if you're feeling distressed, you're not able to work, you think you become someone else, your sleep is getting affected, your appetite is getting affected, and all the time your mind is burdened with unwanted thoughts or feelings, please reach out and take help.
Definitely. A lot of times people are not being able to figure out if something is wrong or not. So I'm sure overdiagnosing may be the solution here.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
Ma'am, we also talked about how 7 out of 10 people actually put out a warning sign for help. And
Right.
your mention of this is actually quite pertinent because a lot of times, as you mentioned, we think that, why did this person do it? He was so happy, he was so rich, etc. So, I mean, is there any patterns in these warning signs? What are the
Yes.
symptoms of, yeah.
Yes. So, what happens is that, sometimes people just kind of withdraw. They stop talking to other people. So, while there are those who may openly talk about it and saying, I'm feeling distressed, I really need help, but there is an equal amount of people who just withdraw and stop. They'll get out of WhatsApp groups, they'll not answer your calls. The third group to look for is someone who has started taking a lot of substances, either drinking a lot and
Hmm.
or anger. Anger is also a symptom. So what we need to do is we need to look out for any behavioral changes that may be happening in people around us. And we
Hmm.
need to reach out to them even though they may shut their doors to us. So we need to persist and reach out and ask them if they are okay. So the friend who suddenly leaves a group or gets angry and irritable, to another friend who is actually talking about it and saying, I'm really feeling very low. I don't know what to do. Who's going on crying? Don't tell her stop crying. Okay.
Hmm.
Instead, reach out and say, okay, what's happening? Can I help you? Okay. And many a times, only listening to them will help you to help them.
Hmm.
At the end of that, take an appointment, seek someone who they can meet, and go and meet that person with them. Sometimes you may need to accompany them to the psychologist or the therapist and stay with them till they get better.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important to understand how to behave with these people because it's a very sensitive situation. Um, Ma'am, just before we end this episode, I would like to ask you, what should people who are showing suicidal tendencies do, or those who feel that they are depressed? Because I mean, current situation is definitely going to see a lot of layoffs, furloughs, and a lot of people are going to see their expectations not being met, and they may feel worthless. So, as you mentioned that it is a particular phase, and it's an instantaneous thing that in that moment you feel that there's nothing left to live on for. So how to overcome that moment? What should these
So the
people do?
first thing that we need to remember that we are not alone in this situation. It's the first time the entire world is going through it.
Hmm.
Okay. The second thing is that to recognize the fact that yes, I am feeling low and I need to put the shame aside and talk to someone about it. Okay, so reach out to your family, reach out to your friends, tell them that listen, I'm feeling damn low, I don't know what to do. Okay, many of the times, when your friends tell you that, okay, I'm also feeling like that, you feel, okay, you're not alone in this situation. Three, take help. Okay, please reach out to a mental health counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist and talk to them about it. Figure out whether it's a situational problem that you need to behave in a certain way or it is a medical problem for which you need to take medication. And the fifth thing is that when you said that our expectations are not being met, I think we have an expectation that all our expectations should be met. Okay, so maybe
Right.
this is the time to recognize that, okay, life was treating us in a certain way. We were behaving like kings and queens, that our expectations should be met. Now, this is the time to realize that, okay, maybe our expectations will not be met. And maybe I just need to sail through this time with just my head up there, because right now, only surviving it is important. Okay, there will be a time where things will get better. I will get that job that I want, the car that I want, or the house that I want. And
Hmm.
also, things will definitely improve. But we have to keep moving on in that direction.
Hmm.
And there is strength in numbers. So the more people you talk to, share with, you will get ideas from them, and things will definitely change. But most important is reach out for help.
Yeah, definitely. The importance of reaching out cannot be overemphasized. So, and as you mentioned, it's definitely important to develop this perspective that life is really valuable and hopelessness is not permanent, failure is not permanent. It's just a phase. Um, on that note, thank you so much for joining us, Anjali ma'am. I'm sure that our conversation with you has clarified a lot of things for so many people, and we hope that our listeners are able to better help those around them who are suffering and behave appropriately, keeping in mind the sensitivity of the situation. So, thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for calling me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Talking Taboo podcast. If you like our idea and want to support it, do follow us on Instagram at We Talk Taboo and visit our Facebook page at Talking Taboo. A simple share and support will go a long way in mainstreaming these conversations and breaking the taboos that we seek to fight. To stay up to date on the show, do follow us on the platform of your choice. We hope you liked this episode and see you in the next one.